Introduction. After 3 years of conquering the sickly male lead, my mission was finally completed. That night when I left, Xiaoxian's eyes were red, desperately clutching my shirt. "Sister, you promised you would never abandon me." I panicked, not knowing what to do. That night was Xiaoxian's coming-of-age night, so I lied to him that I just wanted to prepare for his coming-of-age ceremony. Then when he wasn't paying attention, I ran away. 5 years later, at a dinner party, I suddenly fainted. When I woke up, Xiaoxian was slowly tying me up with a tie. His smile was sick and haunting. "It's been 5 years, when are you going to give me a coming-of-age gift?" Mission accomplished, prepare to return. In the cold voice of the machine, my soul gradually separated from my body. But my arm was still tightly held by someone. Xiaoxian's eyes were red, stubbornly refusing to let go. "Sister, are you going to abandon me?" His voice trembled, losing his usual calmness. Only undisguised panic remained. Looking at Xiaoxian like this, my heart ached. Today was clearly his birthday. I had clearly promised to give him a surprise. Just 3 minutes ago, Xiaoxian was blushing and whispering, "No matter what gift you give me, I will like it." His eyes were filled with sincere and intense affection. "After tonight, I will grow up. From now on, let me protect you." I closed my eyes, my heart bitter. These words, in the end, could not come true. Because, from the moment I transmigrated into this novel, I was told that Xiaoxian is the male lead who is loved by everyone in this world. As for me, I am just a tool character. My mission is to protect Xiaoxian to adulthood, and then hand him over to the female lead. And now 3 years have passed and the female lead is about to appear. I am also about to disappear. Taking a deep breath, I tried to stay calm. "Let go." Xiaoxian stubbornly shook his head. "No." Even his voice became hoarse. "I said I wouldn't leave you." "I said so." He kept repeating "I said so," as if he was clinging to the last life buoy. Desperate to the extreme. At this moment the system's voice rang out, filled with impatience. "Host, leave now. The female lead is about to meet the male lead. You can't be here." I also wanted to leave. But Xiaoxian is the male lead after all. He held me tightly, refusing to let go, making me unable to completely leave this world. There was no other way. The next second I directly leaned close to Xiaoxian's face. The distance between us shortened to the limit. Our breaths swirled around, both ambiguous and gentle. I chuckled. "What are you thinking about again? I won't abandon you, I just want to prepare a little surprise for your coming-of-age ceremony." Xiaoxian's body suddenly stiffened. "Dubu." "What?" I gently grabbed his hand. "But if you're too impatient, I can show you the gift first." Sure enough, Xiaoxian couldn't stand the teasing at all. His ears immediately turned red and even his speech became stuttering. What surprise?" I lowered my head and lightly placed a kiss on the back of his hand. This kiss was very light, very short. But Xiaoxian felt like he was being burned, unconsciously loosening his hand, reflexively pulling it back. He looked at me in a daze. "Sister?" However, the light that had just flashed in his eyes immediately went out. Because I took advantage of the moment he let go to disappear completely, leaving only one last sentence. "I'm sorry I lied to you." I saw Xiaoxian's face full of astonishment. In his eyes, for a brief moment, pain and madness surged. He reached out as if he wanted to hold me. But in the next second, his vision sank into darkness. I knew that I had completely left the world in the book. I let out a soft sigh. Although this was very cruel, in the end Xiaoxian and I would never meet again. Before leaving, I might as well completely cut off his hopes. Only then will he be able to give up on me and wholeheartedly devote his feelings to the female lead. In the original work, the female lead's name is Song Yu. True to her name, she is gentle, warm, and understanding. She is the one destined to be with Xiaoxian for life. After completing this mission, I will have a 5-year vacation. Lying on the soft bed, I slowly closed my eyes. I have to forget this experience. I have to wrap up all those false emotions. Only then will I be able to wholeheartedly embark on the next mission. But as soon as I closed my eyes, the last image of Xiaoxian appeared in my mind. Completely different from his usual docile appearance. His eyes were filled with despair and madness. Creepy. That gaze suddenly reminded me of the first time I saw him. At that time, Xiaoxian had just been sold by his own parents. The young boy was covered in blood, lying motionless in the iron cage of the auction house. A few strands of hair fell over his forehead, making him look both lonely and fragile. The crowd around him whispered, "What was the organizer thinking? Why did they bring a dying kid here?" I heard that his parents were in debt from gambling, so they sold their own son. Oh my God, this kid is so badly injured, he's quite pitiful. A pitiful person must have something to be hated for. To the point of being sold by his own parents, he must be just a bastard who deserves to die. Amidst the cold, calculating gazes, Xian was like a defective product, being arbitrarily judged and speculated upon. However, he remained silent, not even bothering to look up. As if he had long been accustomed to the malice of this world. Time passed, but still no one was willing to bid for Xian. The auctioneer's face became increasingly unsightly. "Are you really not considering it? If no one buys it, we'll have to destroy this item." At that moment I rushed in holding a stack of cash. "Wait, I'm buying him." It was at that moment that I truly realized I was nothing more than a tool. Whether in terms of status or assets, I was a penniless person. I rummaged through every nook and cranny for nearly 10 minutes, scraping together all the little money I had, barely managing to muster up enough to pay the starting price. So, under the gaze of many people, I struggled to bring Xian home. The person was saved. But the problem arose. I didn't know how to raise him. The young man stood at the door like a wounded wolf cub, alert and cold, absolutely refusing to enter the house. Even though he appeared expressionless on the outside, I could still feel that he was always tense. His breathing was constrained, his eyes were fixed on me as if he wanted to examine me every inch. Being stared at by him, I felt a little unnatural, and in the end I could only awkwardly utter a scripted sentence. "Hello, my name is Lin Yuan." The person opposite still had no reaction. I was a little embarrassed, but it was understandable. After all, in the original work, Xian had been abused by her own parents for 15 years. It was only natural to be wary of others. Thinking of this, my heart suddenly softened. Even my voice became a bit gentler. "From now on, I am your relative. In front of me, you don't need to be so reserved." At this moment, Xian finally raised his head. His eyes were as deep as ink, and he slowly spoke, saying the first sentence of the night. "What are the conditions?" Conditions? I was stunned for a moment. Xian still maintained his wariness. "You saved me. Under what conditions?" As expected of the male lead, after just a few sentences he had already left me speechless. Could it be that I was going to say that I saved him just to complete the system mission? So I gently patted his head. "Call me sister." This time it was Xian's turn to be stunned. "What?" I smiled. "I'm younger than you, isn't it obvious that adults save children? What conditions can I ask for?" The corners of his lips curled into a meaningful smile. "But if you want me to always be by your side, then call me sister. Is that okay?" After all, I had just spent all my assets to buy him. Catching someone who would later command the wind and summon the rain, calling me sister a few times, isn't it too much? Under the moonlight, the young man's earlobes were slightly red. After a long while, he seemed to be embarrassed by my teasing, reluctantly uttering 2 words. "Sister." I burst out laughing without hiding anything. But later, just because of these 2 words, sister, I risked my life to protect him for 3 years. From that moment on, Xian officially stayed by my side. According to the original, in these 3 years he was supposed to go through countless dark situations. According to the original, Xian was supposed to be polished by life, becoming a cold and heartless person despite being very young. His methods would become increasingly extreme and cruel. Therefore, I intentionally did the opposite of the original plot. As if I had read the script beforehand, I led Xian to avoid countless dangers in the future, protecting him well. Even though there were moments of suffocating tension, in the end he was always calm and safe. Xian also changed a lot. He was no longer gloomy and lonely, but gradually became an outstanding, gentle and polite young man. Every time he looked at me, those peach blossom eyes were always filled with laughter without hiding anything. He also used a low and pleasant voice, repeating the 2 words sister in my ear over and over again, making me numb to the point of being unable to bear it. My memory flashed back to 3 years later. Xian's last gaze at that time was completely different from what I had seen before. Suddenly, a sense of unease rose in my heart. After being betrayed by the person closest to me, how would Xian feel? Angry at being abandoned? Despair? Or hatred? I woke up from my dream, cold sweat pouring down my body. Instinctively, I poked the system. System, how is Xian now? The system was stunned for a moment. Huh? You mean the male lead from the previous world? He doesn't look very good right now. His mood is always in a state of collapse and loss of control. My heart suddenly sank. But the system comforted him. This is normal, the original plot was like this. The male lead, in his darkest moment, met the female lead, Songyu, who was like a saving light. And from then on he fell madly in love with Songyu. Xian had been betrayed and felt extremely insecure, even imprisoning Songyu. But in the end, thanks to Songyu's companionship, he was able to escape the trauma in his heart. The two of them walked together for the rest of their lives. I had read this story thousands of times, no need for the system to tell it. I breathed a sigh of relief. The ending was already predetermined, what else could I worry about? But later I realized that I had made a serious mistake. If I had noticed Xian's eyes when he looked at me earlier, infatuation, excitement, even sickness, would I have discovered that he was actually a lunatic who was good at disguising? Such a lunatic could not be dragged along by the script. And the so-called ending had long gone off track. For what? I couldn't believe my ears. 5 years have passed, I just finished my long vacation and was about to start my next mission. But the system suddenly informed me. Xian's blackening index has skyrocketed. The female lead could not be conquered, the plot was seriously broken. The world was about to be destroyed. The system spoke softly, lacking confidence. Master, Songyu has failed, you must conquer Xian in her place. Why didn't you say so earlier? Wait until I betrayed him before coming back, isn't this suicide? I couldn't imagine how much my betrayal had hurt Xian back then, causing his dark value to skyrocket like that. Now I'm coming back to conquer him. I thought back to the plot, my heart was half cold. 5 years had passed. Xian was now 23 years old. According to the progress of the original work, he had reached the peak of his ability, resources, and methods. Cruel, brutal, extreme, and obsessive. Now I was confronting him, no different from an extra going to fight a max-level master. I shook my head repeatedly, rejecting the system. But the system cried and cried, Master, I beg you, the previous world is our responsibility. If it is destroyed, we will also be wiped out. Until returning to the previous world, the feeling of absurdity still could not be dispelled. The system said Xian was participating in an auction at this time. So I directly appeared at the scene. After having difficulty accepting the truth, I looked around. Only then did I realize that everyone was wearing a custom-made mask. This was definitely a secret auction in high society. Everyone was wearing a mask, so how could I recognize Xian? While I was still angrily blaming the useless system, the red curtain on the stage suddenly slowly lifted, revealing a picture. On it were only a few rough strokes, sketching the sleeping face of a young boy. Seeing this, there were murmurs of disbelief from below the stage. I couldn't believe it either and opened my eyes wide to look. But not because this was a work that shocked the world, but because this was the painting I had drawn of Xian. 10 years ago, when Xian first moved to my house, he had a headache every night to the point of not being able to sleep. He had been injected with a large amount of sedatives by his parents, and the aftereffects had not completely disappeared. So I took him to the hospital for N4. Every night I would tell him innocent stories or sing him lullabies to help him fall asleep. Gradually, Xian, from his initial resistance, was able to fall into a gentle sleep. This painting was drawn while he was sleeping. When he woke up, I gave it to him. I hope you will have sweet dreams every day from now on. The young man's ears were slightly red, and he pursed his lips as he accepted the painting. But unexpectedly, after a long time of detours, I saw it again at the auction 10 years later. The people on the floor looked at each other, clearly not knowing what this painting was worth. Not knowing was right because even I, the one who painted it, didn't know either. 1 million. At this moment, a deep voice rang out. The breathing on the auction floor increased in waves, and everyone's eyes simultaneously turned in one direction. I instantly froze. Wait, isn't this Xian's voice? Furthermore, it came from right next to me. I stiffened my gaze and looked to the side. I saw a man in a formal suit, leaning against the chair with a noble and cold aura. The silver mask made him even more mysterious, making others not dare to approach. At this moment my heart suddenly beat faster. After 3 years of taking care of Xian, I definitely couldn't have mistaken him. This was Xian. It turned out that I had misunderstood the system. It wasn't that it wasn't trustworthy but that it was too trustworthy. It even brought me to the exact seat next to Xian. Perhaps because my expression was too surprised, the man beside me tilted his head slightly, his eyes meeting mine. And at that moment his dark haunting gaze was fixed on me, like a fire that burned me completely. The familiar voice rang in my ears, still gentle, full of charm. "Sister." A gentle sentence, but it made me break out in a cold sweat. Did Xian recognize me? Should I nod? What should I say? Also, how should I explain my departure earlier? In my extremely tense state, my throat was so dry that I couldn't utter a word. "Ah Yen." A sweet voice suddenly rang out, interrupting my thoughts. Only then did I notice that there was a girl sitting on my left. She was wearing a pure white evening gown, and the mask on her face also had soft patterns, further enhancing her gentle, watery appearance. "Ah Yen, the auctioneer is inviting you to the stage, don't stand there in a daze." That intimate voice was like a basin of cold water, instantly waking me up. It was Song Yu. In the original, only Song Yu dared to call the Yen to address the person everyone feared, Xian. So the sister that Xian just said probably wasn't meant for me. After all, I was wearing a mask, he probably wouldn't recognize me. He was probably calling Song Yu beside me. Indeed, when he heard Song Yu's words he just lightly said, and then withdrew his gaze. He stood up and walked towards the stage. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. But in that sigh of relief I couldn't help but feel a little bit of loss. This is no good. Don't even talk about conquering Xian. Right now I don't even have the courage to face a single glance from him. I secretly patted the system and whispered, "This mission must be done by me?" I saw that Song Yu conquered it very successfully, and Xian doesn't seem to be dark at all. Before I could finish, the system anxiously interrupted me. "Master, stop talking, quickly go do the mission. The male lead's blackening index is still increasing." His voice was rarely so tense. "The male lead has already installed an explosive device in the auction hall. When the time comes he will hug this painting and bury everyone in a sea of fire." I raised my head abruptly. Xian on stage was still as gentle as jade, polite and elegant. But in his hand he was playing with a fountain pen. At that moment I held my breath. The system said that this pen was the switch of the mechanism, absolutely not to let Xian press it. Yet Xian dared to openly display his weapon in front of everyone. What a madman. 6. I was anxiously thinking about how to snatch that pen. But Xian on stage was smiling faintly. He stood in front of the applause and the camera, casually taking off his mask. Immediately there was a sound of surprise from below the stage. "Isn't this Mr. Xia?" Xian personally participated in the auction. I remember he was very busy with work. "Oh my god, the real person is even more beautiful than the picture." Amidst the myriad of surprises, the auctioneer carefully stepped forward to interview. "Mr. Xia, may I ask why you are willing to spend such a large sum of money to buy this painting?" Under everyone's curious gazes, Xian gently opened her mouth. "This is the painting my wife painted for me." "Me?" I couldn't believe it as I looked up at the stage, but Xian's expression remained unchanged, as if he was sincerely expressing his love for his wife. The auction floor immediately exploded with shouts and commotion. "Xian is already married. I heard that he stayed single for the sake of the white moonlight. Why did he change his mind? He's read too many novels. What successful man would let his emotions control him?" "That's right. I heard that he and Miss Song are very close. They must have some kind of relationship." As he spoke, someone secretly glanced at Song Yu with admiring eyes. But Song Yu only forced a smile and did not answer. As for me, I was struck by lightning, frozen and unable to react. When did I marry Xian? The auctioneer clearly did not expect that Xian would actually answer this question. He was so excited that his face turned red. After all, Xian was originally cold and cautious, and had never accepted any interviews. Therefore he quickly took advantage of the opportunity to ask, "But I heard that Mr. Xia has always been single?" Xian said, "I'm not single and my relationship with my wife is very good. From the first time I met her at the auction, I fell in love with her at first sight." I remembered Xian's eyes when I saved him at the auction. His eyes were dark and unfathomable. Could that also be called love at first sight? The auctioneer continued to ask, "So is your wife by your side now?" Xiaoxian's cold eyes fell on me. Even though we were far away, I could unconsciously feel him looking at me. "She ran away." "What?" Under the astonished gaze of the auctioneer, Xiaoxian slightly curled his lips. "But it's okay, I found her." After he finished speaking, he picked up the fountain pen and flipped it around indifferently. The system immediately issued a deafening warning. The male lead's blackening index has reached its maximum, detecting that the male lead is about to activate, requesting the owner to immediately stop it. At that moment, I didn't have time to think of anything else and immediately stood up and shouted, "Don't move." As I wished, Xiaoxian's hand did stop. But his eyes were completely locked on my face. His eyes were deep and dark, as if he was suppressing a surging and sickly emotion. He moved his lips slightly and said softly, "I've caught you." 7 After the auction ended, the dinner party began. I changed into the simplest formal wear and hid in the most hidden corner of the crowd. My mind was still in a mess. At that time, after discovering me, Xiaoxian did not act as aggressively as I had imagined. He just calmly walked down the stage and sat back in his original position, which was right next to me. Neither of us said anything. I felt like I was sitting on a pile of fire, so nervous that my palms were sweating, unable to concentrate on watching the auction. There was only one thought in my mind. What should I say to Xiaoxian after the auction ends? "Long time no see, have you been well these past years?" My mind was in a mess, and I had a hard time thinking of a few ways to start a conversation. However, as soon as the auction ended, Xiaoxian was surrounded by a group of noble young masters and left immediately. I stared blankly at his back. Straight, tall, and with a noble aura. Only then did I suddenly realize, Xiaoxian was no longer the young man I knew 5 years ago. Now he is a shining star in the business world. How can I easily come and go as I please? Standing in the middle of the dinner party, the system's urging voice rang out. "Host, your mission is to conquer the male lead, not assassinate the male lead. How can you approach him if you hide in the corner?" I interrupted him with a headache. "Let me calm down a bit. Now whenever I see Xiaoxian I get nervous. How can I conquer him?" Besides, I raised my head. Xiaoxian stood in the middle of the banquet hall, raising a glass with the prestigious figures in the upper class. He was calm, composed, but also so distant that he was untouchable. Now we clearly no longer belonged to the same world. Could he really be conquered? Suddenly, a sweet voice rang out beside my ear. "Hello, Miss Lin." I was startled back to my senses. In front of me, Song Yu was wearing a gorgeous gown, smiling gently at me. She went straight to the point. "You're also a quick transmigrator like me, right?" I was stunned. In the original work, I was just a female sidekick, barely having any sense of existence. So why did the female lead recognize me? "Song Yu seemed to see through my vigilance," she explained. "You and I are both quick transmigrators. When you entered this world, there would definitely be a warning signal. Besides Xiaoxian, he suddenly stopped, then changed to another topic. "You must have heard of it, right? I still haven't completed the conquest mission. This world is about to collapse, so the system urgently sent you here." I hesitantly nodded. "But even if I haven't succeeded, I've been here for 5 years. I know Xiaoxian more or less." Song Yu raised his glass, smiling sincerely. "I'll help you complete the next conquest mission." This was truly a pleasant surprise. After all, having more friends meant having more ways to retreat. So I politely said thank you, took the glass of wine and took a sip, accepting the alliance proposal. Song Yu pulled my hand. "Let's go, I'll take you to meet some big brothers." Before I could finish, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. The crowd automatically dispersed to both sides, leaving a clear path. Xiaoxian leisurely walked towards me, his voice slow but firm. "Baby, let's go home." I was stunned. What did he mean? Song Yu stiffened and tried to speak. "Ah Yen, but Miss Lin just agreed to go with me." Xiaoxian coldly glanced at her. "My wife and I have been apart for 5 years. Now I have to ask permission from an outsider even to be together for a while?" Hearing this, Song Yu's face immediately turned pale and sweat beaded on his forehead. No need." Looking at her reaction, I felt even more uneasy. What exactly did Xiaoxian do in the past 5 years to make Song Yu so scared? Even the female lead was like this, let alone me. Did he really intend to kill me? Seeing me standing still, Xiaoxian resolutely reached out and grabbed my hand, his tone not allowing any resistance. "Let's go." I didn't dare to resist and could only stiffly follow him. Everyone's eyes kept darting back and forth between me, Siesayan and Songyu. Everyone present was a master at observing facial expressions. After a moment of shock, they immediately took turns flattering me. Is this the madam that General Manager Xia just mentioned? She's really beautiful. Sister-in-law's dress. It's really simple and elegant. One look and you can tell she's a good housewife. After 5 years of long-distance relationships, your relationship is still so good. It's really admirable. Expressing their thoughts. Thank you. If you don't know how to compliment, then you don't need to compliment. Furthermore, Siesayan's expression was so ugly right now that it was as if she had a deep hatred towards me. When I woke up, I felt dizzy and my whole body was burning. A slow voice rang out, "You're awake?" Only then did I realize that Siesayan was sitting by the bed, tilting his head to look at me intently. His collar was slightly open, revealing his delicate collarbone and smooth body lines, exuding a lazy yet seductive aura. I only glanced once and my mind was already burning and I quickly looked away. Where is this? Siesayan, Pai house. Pai house. I repeated in a daze. Why did you bring me home? Siesayan was still indifferently playing with a tie in his hand, but when he heard that he suddenly stopped. Sister, did you forget something? He leaned down using a gentle but irresistible force, slowly tying my hands with the tie. I was surprised. Siesayan, what are you doing? Instinctively wanting to struggle, but my body was limp from the strange heat, almost unable to move. Under the dim light, Siesayan stared intently at the knot on my hand, his eyes like he was looking at an unopened gift. Sister. His voice was hoarse. It's been 5 years, the coming-of-age gift you promised me. When are you going to give it to me? My whole body stiffened. The coming-of-age gift? Wasn't this the excuse I used when I left 5 years ago? Unexpectedly, Siesayan not only believed it was true, but also remembered it to this day. I felt guilty and stammered softly, that. Siesayan slightly curled his lips, revealing a meaningful smile. I knew it, you're like this to me. You must have hidden a gift on your person, right? As he spoke, his slender fingers slowly slid along my collar. Let me guess, here, or maybe here. I was already feeling hot and uncomfortable. Being teased like that by him was like adding fuel to the fire. Anger flared up, I resolutely grabbed Siesayan's collar, then fiercely kissed her. Here. The kiss was chaotic and fierce, as if pouring out all the years of repression, resentment, and anger. When it ended, I laughed provocatively, just like 5 years ago. My coming-of-age gift, are you satisfied? At first I only intended to make Siesayan hate me and let me go. But I underestimated him. Siesayan's eyes became even deeper and his breathing became chaotic. He leaned closer, his voice hoarse. I want to be a little more satisfied. The development seemed a bit off. Right at this moment an urgent knock came from outside. Mr. Xia, are you in there? Miss Songyu wants to see you. Siesayan's face immediately darkened from being disturbed, but when he heard the 2 words Songyu his movements paused. The corners of his lips curled into a cold smile. Just in time, I also have something to ask her about. His tone made my skin crawl. Seeing that Siesayan was about to get out of bed and leave, I quickly raised my wrist that was tied by the tie and shook it in front of him. Wait, aren't you going to take this off for me? Is that enough? Siesayan still had a hint of red on her ears, but she looked at me with innocent eyes and smiled gently. No. Her tone was soft, as if she was coaxing a child who didn't understand anything. It's very dangerous outside. Last night at the party, you were only out of my sight for 2 minutes before someone drugged you. So, it's best if you stay by my side forever. Am I being held captive by Siesayan? My hands are tied, the door is locked. I sat back down on the bed uncomfortably and opened my mouth to ask the system. System, is there any way to get me out? Unexpectedly, the system happily replied, what are you going out for? Host, do you know that Siesayan's blackening index has dropped by 40 points? According to my research, every time you approach him, the blackening index will drop a little more. Right now, the world is no longer in danger of collapsing. Me. How the hell is there such a strange setting? In other words, if I leave Siesayan, he will go crazy again? It seems like I can't leave for the time being. My body was still burning hot, so I had no choice but to lie back down on the bed, dizzy. Before going out, Siesayan said that I was drugged. Strange, what kind of drug is this? When I kissed Xiaoxian just now, the heat on my body immediately subsided a lot. But as soon as he left, the feeling of dizziness came back. Uncomfortably rolling around, I unconsciously looked up at the painting hanging on the wall. The painting was simple, just black and white lines sketching the image of a teenager. I was immediately attracted. This was the painting that Xiaoxian had spent 10 million to buy. It was also the gift that I had casually given him 8 years ago. It was very well preserved, framed in an expensive frame, and even after many years, it was still as clean and intact as when it was first opened. Just by looking at it, one could tell how much the owner cherished it. Just as I was absent-mindedly looking at the painting, the door was suddenly pushed open. Xiaoxian had returned. His complexion was even worse than when he left, and he was filled with murderous intent. I was stunned. What happened? Xiaoxian didn't say anything and sat down next to me, one hand tightly hugging my waist. I cried out in panic. What are you doing? Before I could finish my sentence, a pill was suddenly stuffed into my mouth. Don't move, this is the antidote. I swallowed it reluctantly, but I was still half believing. The bitter taste spread in my mouth and I frowned tightly in pain. Xiaoxian noticed me like this. He took advantage of my lack of vigilance and leaned down to kiss my lips. Sister, I'll help you neutralize it a bit. My body immediately stiffened. It wasn't until the faint smell of alcohol wafted over that I was startled and pushed him away. Have you been drinking? He didn't answer. But his eyes were covered in a layer of misty mist, staring at me without blinking. Like a bottomless abyss, it lures people into being unable to escape. Sister, why did you treat me so well before? This sudden question left me frozen in place. But Xiaoxian continued to talk to herself. I've been thinking about it for 8 years, but I still don't understand. When I was at my worst, you were the only one who chose to stay by my side and protect me. But when I grew up and was able to protect you, you tricked me into leaving. His voice finally trembled a little. Do you just like seeing me miserable? Xiaoxian once again revealed a weak expression. This scene was no different from when I saw him leave that year. My heart couldn't help but suddenly tremble violently. Perhaps it was because I was drunk. Xiaoxian took my hand, gently rubbing her face against mine, obediently like a puppy. It doesn't matter anyway. You can see me as crazy or as a tool for entertainment. I just beg you not to leave me. His eyes were red. Sister, please come and have mercy on me. Perhaps it was a side effect of the antidote. My heart softened, unable to resist. I knew that Xiaoxian had liked me since 8 years ago. But I didn't expect that his love would last this long. After all the betrayal I had done to him, after 5 years of loneliness, he could still love me like before. A feeling of bitterness filled my heart. If only I hadn't been the one to conquer him, how good it would have been. If I had been by his side for the past 5 years, would he have become so extreme, insecure and anxious? I couldn't sleep well tonight. Maybe it was the effects of the medicine, or maybe it was the memories that made my eyes moist. In my daze, I felt like Xiaoxian was holding me. Feeling the warmth of his body, I could feel him gently patting my head, whispering something. Just like what I did to him. I heard him say, Sister, I hope you will always have sweet dreams in the future. Ring ring. The reminder sound rang out in the dark night, so piercing. I frowned, feeling a little uncomfortable waking up from my sleep. Xiaoxian was still sleeping soundly. His eyelashes were tightly closed, and in the dim moonlight, his face was no different from the young boy from 8 years ago. I gently moved to turn off my phone, afraid of waking him up. But after searching for a while, I realized this sound came from the system in my head. System, received a chat request from player Songyu. Do you want to listen? I remained silent. Even though Songyu had held my hand before and said he would help me. But right after that, I was drugged again. If Xiaoxian hadn't brought me home, I'm afraid I would have been unconscious somewhere by now. And during this whole process, the only thing I drank was the wine that Songyu gave me. I cautiously agreed to her suggestion. No matter what she wanted to do, I would just have to act accordingly. Sister Lin Yuan, I have found a way to leave here. Songyu's sweet voice was filled with joy, even a little sharp. I was stunned. Leave? What do you mean? Of course, Songyu chuckled. Leave this world where we have to conquer everything. But, if this world collapses, won't we be wiped out as well? That's why I found a way to leave completely, to sever the connection with this world. I'll wait for you at 36 Wutong Street. Before I could reply, Songyu's voice cut off. After the call ended, I still couldn't come back to my senses. 36 Wutong Road? That was the house I used to live in with Xian. Song Yu asked me to stay there. What exactly did he want to do? The feeling of unease made my heart beat wildly. But no matter what, I still decided to go to Wutong Road to take a look, then make it clear to Song Yu, I won't be going back. I don't want to leave Xian again. Looking at the man sleeping beside me, I tried to be gentler, carefully walking downstairs. Darkness enveloped the entire villa, so quiet that you could hear a needle drop. I walked to the main door, put my hand on the doorknob. Sister? A familiar voice suddenly rang out behind me. I was startled and turned around. Xian, who had been lying on the bed just now, had woken up at some point. He leaned lazily against the railing of the stairs, his deep eyes fixed on me, unblinking. There were undercurrents in his eyes, as if signaling an impending storm. You want to leave me again? My heart suddenly skipped a beat. I had clearly never thought about leaving this time. But when I faced Xian's face, I still didn't know why I felt a little guilty. No. I just wanted to go out for a walk. Just a walk. Xian walked closer to me step by step. Then why did you sneak down here without me? He even knew this. In other words, when I went downstairs, Xian had not slept at all. He just coldly watched me leave the room, go down the stairs and head towards the door. I didn't dare to imagine what his mood was like at that moment. Seeing Xian's eyes reddening, I rarely panicked to the point of not knowing what to do. Trust me, this time is not like last time. I will definitely come back. Xian took a deep breath. I saw his hands clenched tightly as if he was trying to hold back something. Just when I thought he was about to explode, he suddenly said in a trembling voice, "Okay." I raised my head, looking at him in disbelief. Xian just silently looked at me deeply. Then, before you leave, aren't you going to give me a goodbye kiss? This request was sudden, but it was hard to refuse. I tiptoed slightly, intending to place a kiss on his lips. But at that moment, Xian raised his hand to cover my mouth. Wait. His voice trembled slightly. First, promise me that this time you will come back. I was momentarily stunned, but when I met those eyes filled with pain that I was trying to suppress, my heart suddenly skipped a beat. This gaze was exactly like 5 years ago when I was forced to leave. That day I tricked Xian, kissed him and then turned around and left. He must have remembered that day too. He must have been afraid that this time it would be like before. A kiss and then a departure with no return date. So I gently stroked his head and reassured him, I promise you I will definitely come back this time. Taking a deep breath, I added, be good and wait for me at home. When I get back, I have something important to tell you. The words I like you that year I had kept hidden for the sake of the mission. 5 years later, if Xian still loved me, then I didn't want to miss him anymore. After saying that, I leaned down to kiss him. Xian immediately wrapped her arms around me tightly, not allowing me to dodge, responding to this kiss even more deeply. Hey, you're here. Song Yu wore a white dress, smiling as she walked towards me. I knew you would come. What player could stand someone like Xian? Mentally unstable and extreme. No. I calmly interrupted her. I came to tell you, I'm not going anywhere. Song Yu's smile froze on her face. After a long while she slowly spoke. Lin Yuan, do I remember the day you first arrived? That day, Xian's blackening index reached its peak. He wanted to burn down the entire auction. You haven't forgotten, have you? I nodded slightly. And yet you still want to be by his side? He's clearly a lunatic. Hearing that, I firmly raised my head. He wouldn't do that. My memory returned to the first day I came here. I had secretly obtained the pen that Xian had used as a detonator. But when the system checked, it wasn't an explosive device. It was just a suicide device. Furthermore, its destructive power was just enough to kill a person. I didn't know why Xian did that. But the truth was that, from the beginning to the end, even on the day his darkening reached its peak, the most extreme thing he had ever thought of was to end himself. He had never harmed any innocent people. It was at that moment that I realized that I had been blinded by the original plot. My initial prejudice had made me unconsciously believe that Xian had grown into a stubborn, insane, and cruel person. But from the moment the system told me it was a suicide device, I suddenly understood. Perhaps Xian had never changed. Perhaps he was still the same sincere and passionate boy from back then. It was just that in the 5 years I left, he had to walk through the days alone carrying a broken love. Song Yu was silent. You don't want to go and I can't force you. But, she raised her eyes and stared at me, this is your last chance to leave. Before, when Xiaoxian's blackening index skyrocketed, the entire world almost collapsed. But now the world has gradually stabilized, only this area is still fluctuating the most. This is the only way out. Think carefully, tonight the world will completely recover. If you don't leave, you will have to stay by Xiaoxian's side forever. After she finished speaking, Song Yu looked at me intently as if she was sure that I would leave with her. But I only paid attention to one sentence in her words. Why is this place the place with the most fluctuation? This is 36 Wutong Road, the house where Xiaoxian and I used to live together. Song Yu didn't reply. Under the moonlight, I saw the corners of her eyes were slightly red. Suddenly, she blurted out a sentence that had no beginning or end. Ling Yuan, sometimes I really hate you. I was stunned. It's clear that I'm the predestined female lead. It's clear that I'm the one with the mission to heal Xiaoxian. But in his heart, there will always only be you. I've tried so many ways, trying to follow the original to heal him, trying to make him open up to me. But no matter what I do, I can't do it. Her voice choked up. Xiaoxian has had many mental breakdowns, but he never once came to me. On the contrary, he always hugged your painting, hid in this house and secretly cried. At that time I was so angry that I stole his painting and put it up for auction. But I didn't expect that Xiaoxian would be willing to spend $1 million to buy it back. It was at that moment that I realized, perhaps from the very beginning I had no chance of winning. Every word she said was like a hammer hitting my heart, making it tremble. I didn't know what to say. At that time I was so agitated that I drugged you. Thinking back now, I still feel guilty. Song Yu wiped the corner of her eyes and bowed deeply in front of me. So this time I want to take you away as an atonement. I was silent for a long time, then slowly opened my mouth. No need. Being forced by the system to conquer someone you don't like. That feeling I could understand better than anyone. Song Yu was forced to get close to someone she didn't love. As for me, I was forced to leave the person I loved. We were both puppets pushed to the brink by missions. And Song Yu, other than that time, had never really caused any great harm. I also no longer had the interest to argue anymore. I hoped that in the new world she could live true to herself. Seeing that I did not pursue the matter, Tong Yu seemed to choke up. After a very soft thank you, the light gradually faded, and her figure gradually became blurry. At the last moment she suddenly turned her head. That's right, there's one more thing I haven't said. This place is the weakest point, because Xiaoxian's emotions fluctuate the most here. Song Yu recalled the scene she had witnessed. Xiaoxian, who was always cold and aloof in front of outsiders, was sitting in this old house, quietly staring at a painting for a long time. So long that he looked like a statue. She felt bored and was about to leave, but she suddenly caught a glimpse of a sparkling light. He was crying. Not a sound, but his eye sockets were red as if he was trying to suppress the pain to the utmost. Sister? Perhaps at that very moment Song Yu knew that she would never be able to conquer him. After Song Yu left, I was still a little bewildered. Xiaoxian had cried? From the first time we met until the day we met again in the past 8 years, I had never seen him shed a single tear. Even though when his parents sold him out or when I betrayed him, at most his eyes would only turn slightly red. Maybe that's why I always thought he was so strong that nothing could break him. I never thought that the cruel male protagonist in books would sometimes hide away to cry quietly. In my days I suddenly realized that it was already morning. And I was standing in front of the gate of a villa. Even though the distance was far, I could still clearly see Xiaoxian's figure standing right at the door. He was clearly tall and had a steady appearance, but he had his head lowered, looking both lonely and strangely fragile. He had actually waited for me all night just because of a promise. I couldn't hold back anymore and immediately ran towards him. Xiaoxian. He suddenly raised his head. In those eyes, for the first time, I saw undisguised surprise, along with the joy of finding something I had lost. I threw myself into his arms, my eyes stinging, and softly said, Xiaoxian, you're back? Xiaoxian was 15 years old when she was sold by her own parents. Someone held a child in front of him, bent down and threatened, Look, if you don't listen, this is how you'll end up. If you're still naughty in the future, I'll sell you like this too. The child only glanced at Xiaoxian's wounded body, then burst into tears. But Xiaoxian was just calm, expressionless. He didn't find this scary. Ever since he was born, his parents, gambling addicts, had always used him as a scapegoat, scolding him for no reason. But after beating and scolding him, they hugged him and cried miserably, "Xiaoyan, your parents really love you, it's just that sometimes you can't control yourself." At that time Xiaoyan was still too young, too confused. Did love mean beating and scolding? If so, he didn't need that thing called love. He just wanted to live. So being sold was fine. As long as he didn't have to stay by those two people's side, that was fine. Therefore, when the people sitting below the stage looked at him like a commodity, calmly commenting and mocking him, Xiaoyan didn't feel anything. These words, compared to what his parents had said, weren't even 1/10 as cruel. His heart had long since died. However, the moment a girl rushed forward in panic, grabbed his hand and shouted loudly, "I bought him," Xiaoyan was still stunned, his eyes unconsciously widening. Why did she buy him? Because he was cheap and easier to manipulate? Even so, this was quite normal because once he was bought he was only hers, of course he had to be manipulated and tortured. Is there anyone stupid enough to want to raise someone they bought? At first Xiaoyan thought so. But then after a while he discovered that this girl was really an idiot. She would smile beautifully, looking as if everything was within her reach. "Call me sister, I will protect you from now on." However, when Xiaoyan actually called her sister, she would cough a few times and even her ears would turn red. Alright, just call her normally, don't call her so tacky." Xiaoyan couldn't help but laugh. This was the first time he realized that there were such cute people. But in the following days that girl named Lin Yuan was really like an older sister protecting him. Even though she was dirt poor, she always gave him the best things. When he had a headache because of the side effects of the sedative, she immediately took him to the best hospital for treatment. After that she gently sang a lullaby and drew him a picture. Xiaoyan thought she was stupid, but when he received the picture his hands were extremely careful, almost trembling. His ears were also red. For someone who had never known love, every little gesture and action was like a slow poison, slowly penetrating his bones. Compared to the love his parents had given him, Lin Yuan's care was even more profound in his heart. The day Lin Yuan left, Xiaoyan felt like he was about to suffocate. The pain spread throughout his body, making him unable to sleep all night. He didn't understand what he had done wrong that made Lin Yuan turn her back and leave without looking back for 5 long years. He also didn't know where Lin Yuan had gone, and that for 5 years there had been no news. Xiaoyan searched every corner of the city, but other than the house on 36 Wusonglin Street, he couldn't find a trace of her in this world. So he often secretly went there to cry. He hoped that maybe like before Lin Yuan would suddenly appear, pat his head and say, "Don't cry anymore, didn't you come back?" But no. He could only wait for Song Yu alone. At first, Xiaoyan didn't care much about Song Yu until he heard the system say to her, "Master, Lin Yuan has completed the mission. Xiaoyan must be in great pain right now. As long as you show a little concern, you can save him and become the only light in his life." When the name Lin Yuan was mentioned, Xiaoyan suddenly stopped. After that, Xiaoyan became increasingly close to Song Yu. Many people in the industry speculated, General Manager Xia is cold and has never taken the initiative to approach women. He must have fallen in love with the young lady of the Song family. But only Xiaoyan understood he just wanted to hear the conversation between Song Yu and the system. After a period of contact, Xiaoyan gradually understood everything. It turned out that he was the main character in a book. It turned out that Tong Yu was his true lover. It turned out that Lin Yuan was just a supporting character who came to catalyze him, and now she had completely left this world. During that time Xiaoyan felt more desperate than ever. He acted more and more cruelly and inhumanely, causing his competitors in the industry to tremble in fear. But one day he heard the system's bewildered voice. It's over, why did the male lead's blackening index skyrocket like this? If this continues the whole world will collapse. If you want to untie the knot you have to tie it. Master, we still have to call Lin Yuan back. Song Yu hesitated for a while but finally bit his lip and agreed. Alright. If I can't finish attacking Xiaoyan, then I'll have to let that person come back. At that time he couldn't describe the emotions in his heart. Joy, unease and madness all mixed together, causing his emotions to surge in an instant. That day Xiaoyan had prepared 2 plans. If Lin Yuan didn't come back he would hug her only painting and in the flames explode himself. He would burn himself and her painting to ashes. no longer able to distinguish between you and me, and thus be together forever. But if Lin Yuan came back, he would never let go no matter what he had to do. And fortunately, as he prepared the self-detonation mechanism, a familiar voice rang out, traveling through 5 years. Don't move. Xiaoxian couldn't help but smile under his mask. She had returned. The dinner party ended and Song Yu came to find Xiaoxian. Yan, I really think it's not worth it for you to spend $1 million on a painting. You did it, right? Xiaoxian coldly interrupted. You stole my painting and brought it to the auction? Song Yu was stunned as if he wanted to explain. Xiaoxian turned around and walked away. I heard your conversation with the system. Don't pretend with me. Since you and the system have helped me so much, I won't hold it against you this time. But... Xiaoxian looked at Song Yu with icy cold eyes. There won't be a next time. As he walked away, Song Yu's sobbing suddenly sounded from behind. Xiaoxian, do you think you can keep her? Xiaoxian stood still, feeling pain and anxiety enveloping him. He wondered if his love for Lin Yuan was a cage, an invisible chain forcing her to endure it for the rest of her life. The more he thought about it, the more choked up he felt, remembering Song Yu's words, the truth she had so frankly exposed. Did Lin Yuan really want to come back to him when everything had only brought her pain? Xiaoxian could no longer hide his feelings. He wanted to keep her not only because he loved her but also because he could not bear to see her suffer because of his love. But if his presence only made her more miserable, would he have the courage to let go? And that night, in his drunken state, he accidentally opened all the doors of the room, not locking them, not keeping anything back. He just wanted to give her freedom even though he never wanted her to leave. He gave her the right to decide because he knew that if he didn't he would only make things worse. When Lin Yuan left with Song Yu, Xiaoxian leaned against the door, feeling like his heart was being torn apart. The night was endless, dark and heavy. He felt like he couldn't breathe. He was afraid that Lin Yuan wouldn't come back, afraid that she would deceive him again, enter another world, leave him forever. He didn't know if he could live without her, if this world would still have meaning without her by his side. It seems like there's no other way. He could only stand there and wait. Tonight was so long as if it had no end. Just like the past 5 years, so long that it made one unable to control the feeling of madness and despair. Xiaoxian. A familiar voice suddenly rang out. Xiaoxian raised his head abruptly. Only then did he realize that it was already morning. Lin Yuan walked under the bright light, staggering into his arms. Xiaoxian trembled and hugged her tightly. His hug gradually tightened, almost wanting to press her into his flesh. Fortunately, this time was not like 5 years ago. He finally waited for the person he loved. Wait. I looked at Xiaoxian, who had crawled into my bed without permission, feeling a little headache. Why are you in my bed so late at night? It had been almost a week since Xiaoxian and I confirmed our feelings for each other at the farewell party. I really couldn't understand him. Before we got together, Xiaoxian had always acted like a sick person, something like imprisonment and madness. But after being together he became innocent, blushing and sleeping separately from me for several days. When I thought that Xiaoxian didn't like being close to others, he suddenly appeared beside me in the middle of the night, startling me. Xiaoxian slightly lowered her eyes, her expression a little aggrieved. I remember when I was little, you used to hug me to sleep. Why can't you do that when you grow up? Was this the same? I looked at Xiaoxian's tall, healthy figure, speechless. I understand, Xiaoxian nodded. So it turns out you only liked me when I was little. If I could be a little younger, you would agree to sleep with me? Don't turn me into someone with such strange interests. And I don't know if it's an illusion, but why does Xiaoxian's words seem so green tea? I tried to keep my face calm, pretending to be calm, and said, stop talking nonsense. Tell me, what do you want to see me for this late at night? Xiaoxian seemed to be sad, automatically ignoring my question, her voice pitiful and innocent. Even though I can't shrink now, I can't make you like me anymore. But I can have a baby with you. Me. Why did the topic deviate like this? Seeing my face blushing, Xiaoxian couldn't help but laugh. He then seriously said, don't you remember what day it is today? I shook my head in confusion. Xiaoxian's eyes suddenly darkened. You've always been so indifferent to me. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but kiss him on the cheek. Just kidding, I actually remember. Don't be angry. Xiaoxian's eyes flashed with joy, but he still seriously justified. I'm not angry. How could I be angry with you? I laughed. That being said, have you never been angry with me before? Not yet. So? My voice softened. How was your mood the last time I went? Even though we didn't say which time, we both understood. Xiaoxian raised his head to look at me, his eyes sincere. Of course I'm worried about you. I was stunned. He continued. That day you suddenly disappeared from my sight. I almost went crazy with worry. How could I have any other feelings? My eyes suddenly stung. But when you left, you lied to me, aren't you angry? Actually, this question had been weighing on my heart for a long time. So long that it was like a poisonous thorn stabbing deep into my heart, causing me to feel guilty every time I saw Xiaoxian. So I couldn't help but take this opportunity to pretend to calmly ask him. Just as I was anxiously waiting for an answer, a warm feeling suddenly came from my eyelids. Xiaoxian kissed my eyes that had turned red at some point. His voice was extremely gentle, not angry. Whether I lied to you or not, the first person to pull you out of the mud was me. Actually, the fact that you agreed to come to this world to save me has made me very happy. He held my hand tightly, our fingers intertwined. It's just that I'm too greedy, wanting you to stay with me for the rest of my life. Tears finally fell. Only this time my heart no longer ached. Instead, it was filled with an unprecedented warmth. I wiped my tears. Okay. Having said that, I leaned over, revealing the exquisite cake that I had hidden behind my back. Xiaoxian was stunned. This is... I gently stroked the 24 candles on the cake and said seriously, Xiaoxian, happy birthday. I have never forgotten, today is your birthday. Looking at Xiaoxian's expression that had yet to come to my senses, I couldn't help but tease him. What's wrong? Don't you like this gift? Xiaoxian finally raised his head. Before my eyes, the mature man under the warm candlelight, his facial features a little blurry. In an instant it seemed like he had returned to a few years ago. The unfinished regret of that year's coming-of-age ceremony was finally made up for at this moment. The 18-year-old boy's eyes were filled with love and he spoke across space. No, I like it very much. Immediately after, he softly said, I like you very much too. And